आई होप यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि एक ऐसे शख्स जिनसे आप काफ़ी दिनों से मिलना चाह रहे थे और आप नहीं मिल पाए एंड ऑल ऑफ ए सडन लाइक नो यू केम टू नो दैट ही पास्ड अवे सो दैट वाज रियली अ सॉर्ट ऑफ ग्रेट लॉस फॉर मी आई बिलीव दैट व्हेन इट कम्स टू सुमित सरकार ही वाज वेरी डिफरेंट from other historians, and I believe that there are four things like now which really makes him very different, a great scholar. किसी भी फॉर्म में आप हिस्ट्री पढ़ रहे हैं, I think history is always incomplete without his writing. It is so unfortunate that he is not there anymore with us. But then I believe that it would be really injustice to his contribution to history if we really classify him purely as a Marxist scholar, right? I think what makes Sumit Sarkar very different that he kept on evolving over the period. Though I was not so lucky that I could be taught by him, because जब तक मैं थोड़ा academics में आया तब तक like he got retired. When it comes to his study on modern India, he transformed the study of modern India by bringing class, gender, popular politics into historical narratives. सुमित सरकार का एक बड़ा contribution ये है कि सुमित सरकार ने उस history को he did not keep it confined to those archival material. Rather, he had started hunting so many parallel documents, right, or parallel sources. The questions he taught us to ask will continue to shape history. So I believe that this person has exactly taught us to keep on asking the questions, because those questions would somehow unfold the new dimensions of history. Just now I'm coming from the cremation of Professor Sumit Sarkar. As you can see, a couple of pictures behind it. So such a great loss of history, I can't tell you. And of course, for those who have been studying history, किसी भी फॉर्म में आप हिस्ट्री पढ़ रहे हैं, I think history is always incomplete without his writing. Though whatever he has already written, like that is with us. मैं इनफैक्ट पिछले 1-1.5 साल से उनसे मिलने की कोशिश कर रहा था और मुझे अपने रिसर्च के लिए कुछ इनपुट चाहिए था जिसकी वजह से मैं उनसे मिलना चाहता था और बात करना चाहता था. बट आई न्यू दैट ही वॉज नॉट कीपिंग वेल और पिछले ऑलमोस्ट 3 सालों से उनकी तबीयत थोड़ी ठीक नहीं रह रही थी. पहले भी बीमार थे, ठीक है, पहले भी, लेकिन उन्होंने रिकवर किया, फिर उसके बाद फिर बीमार हो गए. एंड देन फाइनली इट इज़ सो अनफॉर्चुनेट दैट ही इज़ नॉट देयर एनी मोर विद अस. एंड एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट इट्स सच ए ग्रेट लॉस. मुझे लगा कि उनके क्रिमेशन पे बहुत सारे लोग आएंगे और एक बड़ी हुजूम होगी अकेडमिशियंस की, स्टूडेंट्स की, जिनको उन्होंने पढ़ाया, जिनको नहीं भी पढ़ाया उन्होंने. एंड दैट्स लाइक नो दैट्स वाई आई स्टार्टेड प्रीटी अर्ली फ्रॉम माई प्लेस कि मुझे टाइम से पहुंचना है. बिकॉज आई होप यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि एक ऐसे शख्स जिनसे आप काफ़ी दिनों से मिलना चाह रहे थे और आप नहीं मिल पाए एंड ऑल ऑफ ए सडन लाइक नो यू केम टू नो दैट ही पास्ड अवे. सो दैट वाज रियली अ सॉर्ट ऑफ ग्रेट लॉस फॉर मी, आई मस्ट से. तो मैंने कहा कि मुझे उनकी ज़रूरत थी कुछ, तो मुझे लगा काफ़ी भीड़ हो गई. बट देन अनफॉर्चुनेटली व्हेन आई रीच टू द क्रिमेशन ग्राउंड देयर वाज नॉट सच ए ग्रेट सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रेजेंस ऑफ पीपल. Some limited people were there. Most of the people from left wing, they were very much present, and in fact all the big shots were there. So I believe that since a Marxist historian passed away, and that's how mostly the people from left wing were present. But then I believe that it would be really injustice to his contribution to history if we really classify him purely as a Marxist scholar, right? I think what makes Sumit Sarkar very different that he kept on evolving over the period. मैं अगर बात करूं उनकी हिस्ट्री राइटिंग की, like when he wrote his first book, at that point of time undoubtedly he was inspired or influenced by the Marxist historiography, but then it's still it was a more political history. And from there how he moved towards the history from below, or the subaltern history writing, and then he goes to social and cultural history. So you can see the complete or continuous evolution of Sumit Sarkar as a historian, which makes him great also, right? As far as his historiography is concerned, there's a particular word has been used for historiography that's called a skeptical Marxism. So he was not a person theoretically completely dependent on Marxism. Rather, he was just trying to bring out certain threads of Marxism, but then his interpretations used to be very different. So he was not fundamentally dependent on Marxism, or let's say Marxist history writing. So he was having so many differences, and so many questions he has asked on Marxist historiography. So that's how I think branding him or classifying him purely as a Marxist scholar, that would be really an injustice. बहरहाल अगर मैं अपनी बात करूं कि हाउ डिड आई कम टू नो और हाउ डिड आई कम टू like come into contact with his history writing, so I would like to remind you about or I would like to remind myself in fact कि when I became a student of history in late 90s. So as usual, you know that when it comes to modern India, it's all about like, you know, Bipin Chandra. Bipin Chandra's book, like that's India's struggle for independence, used to be the Gita, Bible, Ramayana, Quran. जो भी कहना चाहते हैं आप कह सकते हैं. I also, as usual, read the same book. But then when I read the book of Bipin Chandra, I realized one thing, कि there's something missing. मतलब somehow I was not having that sense of completeness after reading that book. So when I read that book of Sumit Sarkar, that is Modern India, it is like one of the book everybody, those who have studied history, किसी भी लेवल पे कहीं पे भी, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि सभी को ये बुक याद ही होगी. तो जब मैंने इस किताब को पढ़ी तो देन ओनली आई कुड रियलाइज कि ओके नाउ लाइक some sort of completeness I could feel in modern India. So I can say that alternative perspective was like somehow created or built by Sumit Sarkar, and that really made him great. Though I was not so lucky that I could be taught by him, because जब तक मैं थोड़ा academics में आया तब तक he got retired, and his public appearance was not so frequent. Though yet I can say I got so many chances to listen him on multiple platforms. I got several chances to interact with him also. और मैं अभी भी चाहता था कि उनसे इंटरैक्ट करना, बिकॉज एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट मुझे भी उनकी थोड़ी हेल्प चाहिए थी. पढ़ने पढ़ाने के दौर में मुझे लगता है कि जितनी भी किताबें उन्होंने लिखी पार्सली और कंप्लीटली, आई हैव रेड मोस्ट ऑफ देम. ठीक है, कभी पढ़ने के टाइम पे जरूरत पड़ी, कभी पढ़ाने के टाइम पे जरूरत पड़ी, एंड दैट्स हाउ लाइक आई हैव गॉन थ्रू मोस्ट ऑफ हिज राइटिंग. I believe that when it comes to Sumit Sarkar, he was very different from other historians, and I believe that there are four things, precisely speaking, there are four things which really makes him very different, a great scholar. ये चार बातों में अगर मैं पहली बात कहूं कि this person had presented an alternative perspective on modern India. That is the first thing what I found very important, very unique. When it comes to his study on modern India, he transformed the study of modern India by bringing class, gender, popular politics into historical narratives. And in fact, the way he has presented this history of modern India, one of the basic and the fundamental thing I have noticed, and I'm totally convinced with him, that he always asked, he always created that feeling that there is no point of finding a sort of neat conclusion in history. I have noticed that sometimes when people read history, they always talk about conclusion. In fact, students are also very curious to write about conclusion, and I always used to say one thing. Undoubtedly, this is a sort of borrowed idea from him only. I always used to say one thing, कि when it comes to history, there cannot be a neat conclusion. And the moment you try to conclude something, I think you are just killing the soul of the subject. You have to keep the complexities, or you have to you have to keep it open, the complexities of the subject. And if the complexities are on, then only somehow we'll be asking the new questions to the subject, and that's how we'll try to find the new answers of those questions, and that's how you'll unfold the new dimensions. And probably this is what Sumit Sarkar was doing. So one important thing, that modern perspective, and the way this modern perspective is somehow bringing new dimensions, and that's how there's unfolding of those new dimensions. This is one of the greatest contribution I find. Okay. The second important contribution, what I realize, it's about using the non-archival material. The history of modern India, as you can see that when it comes to modern India, ज़्यादातर writings modern India की archival based होती है, यानी most of the government documents are very much present in the archive. Of course, you have to keep in mind that transition from colonial to a free country. तो archive की भी definition उसके हिसाब से बदलती रही, but ज़्यादातर history writing जो है archival material के बेस पे हुई. सुमित सरकार का एक बड़ा contribution ये है कि सुमित सरकार ने उस history को, he did not keep it confined to those archival material. Rather, he had started hunting so many parallel documents, right, or parallel sources, and on the basis of what he had created a new perspective on history. So he's known for using literature, pamphlets, newspapers, various associations being built at the local level, the popular actions being done by people. So that's how this person has kept on hunting the new documents, non-archival archival documents, and he was writing history precisely on the basis of that. And probably that was the reason because of what he could present that alternative perspective on modern India. The third important contribution is introduction to subaltern. He is not introducing the subaltern along with Ranjit Guha or 1980s. In 1980s, I believe that Ranjit, much before the coming of the formal entry of subaltern studies in India, already he has introduced this particular issue in India, or this particular historiography in India, or history writing in India. If you'll remember this book, that is the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, that is his first book. In fact, it is his PhD research. And I must say that this is that monograph, which is the original research-based work of Sumit Sarkar. I think in this particular book itself, he has started hunting that same methodology, and that's how he was capable of presenting an alternative picture. Because उससे पहले स्वदेशी movement को एक बड़े दूसरे तरीके से देखा गया कि how the nationalist leaders, the elite class nationalist leaders, have decided to launch this movement. They have decided a date, and they have their own let's say programs and policies and everything. So how they have mobilized the masses, how the masses are coming into this movement, and that's how the movement is taking place. But then the way this person has this person has somehow revealed an alternative way of seeing this Swadeshi movement. So I think we can say this was the informal beginning of subaltern studies. So after the establishment of subaltern studies, undoubtedly he was also one of the founding member of it, without any doubt. So undoubtedly he has started a new trend, that trend of history from below. And the another thing, with respect to this subaltern studies, also you should keep in mind that this person never believed in romanticizing the subaltern. Because, and in fact, this is one of the reasons because of what later he questioned that subaltern history writing. Because in subaltern history writing, you can find that that trend was there when, in romanticizing, but the way they had been talking about subaltern heroes, and they were discarding the role of basically the elite leaders, and they had been trying to give more preference to the subaltern leaders. That tendency could be noticed in the subaltern subaltern history writers, and he was not very convinced with that. Rather, the another thing which makes him very unique, that he always believed that these two are not very much separate. मतलब आप पूरे marginalized या पूरे secluded तरीके से आप marginalized group के history को नहीं देख सकते, because they are very much interconnected, and that's how he wrote the history in a very interconnected way. जहाँ पे जब आप बात करते हैं elite politics की, how this elite politics was being perceived by the subaltern classes, how they were reacting, how they were taking their programs and policies, how they had been acting upon them. These are certain things which are undoubtedly very unique with him, right? And then the fourth thing I'll say, this person kept on evolving as a historian. And in fact, he has himself admitted on several occasions that he has somehow realized that there are new questions which are being asked in history right now. And in fact, when he wrote his book, let's say if we'll talk about this book only, at that point of time, the meanings or the questions in history used to be very different. And that's how this person is coming up with new questions. And of course, he just adapted all those new questions and tried to answer those questions. एक चीज मैं आपको बड़ी खास बताऊंगा सुमित सरकार सर के बारे में, कि जब आप उनकी बिब्लियोग्राफी देखेंगे, दैट यूज्ड टू बी वेरी वास्ट, राइट? और वो पता है वास्ट इसलिए होती थी क्योंकि जो है आप दो तरीके से हिस्ट्री लिख सकते हैं. You have just studied the primary sources and you wrote something on the basis of that. And then when your bibliography is so vast, it means that person had been reading a lot and he was trying to collect the ideas from the various other history writing, and then only he was just framing his questions and he was trying to answer those questions. So that I hope you can understand how this person was very much adaptive, and the new questions were very much very much acknowledged by him, and he just tried to answer those questions. So I must say for him, history was not something which was rigid. The way I told you that he never talked about a sort of neat conclusion in history, because the moment you try to conclude something, I believe that you are ending that any further scope, and you believe that whatever you have written, that is going to be that is going to become the final sort of write up on that, which is completely incorrect. You know that history is a sort of a very dynamic subject which keeps on evolving, and he was believing in that. So his evolution, if you really wish to understand his evolution, I must say all these books, I think it does include all the books, important books, what I know at least, which were written by him. So if we'll see his readings, somehow you'll be able to understand how this person was evolving over the period. So when he started his writing with the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, that was in 1973, I guess. So उस समय उन्होंने जिस तरीके से हिस्ट्री लिखी, like somehow he presented just like an alternative perspective, ठीक है. And in fact, like how the people in during the Swadeshi movement have reacted. And in fact, in this particular book, he even tried to integrate this idea ki how the like social presence of all these elite leaders was also helping them to manipulate the masses. And that's how they were quite successful in getting this at one hand support of the masses. On the other hand, as I told you, that from this non-archival materials, he tried to somehow make us understand how people were perceiving all these things and why did they participate in this movement. So that was a very fresh perspective on modern India. Fine. And after that, this person he came into contact with the Subaltern Studies, and somewhere in 1983, he wrote wrote an article that's called as Popular Movement and Middle Class Leadership in Late Colonial India. I think during this particular period, he was completely under the influence of Subaltern Studies. आप जो भी कह लें, आप इसको इन्फ्लुएंस कहे या फिर आप आइडियोलॉजी कहे, ठीक है. सो उन्होंने ये आर्टिकल लिखा. But then over the period, somehow he was not very happy with this, with this idea. So after writing this Modern India, undoubtedly Modern India is one book which is a great achievement of this person. And in fact, when it comes to this particular book, normally it's being called as the textbook, right? Or when it comes to the book of Bipin Chandra Sekhar Bandyopadhyay or Sumit Sarkar, they are considered to be the textbook. बट मुझे लगता है कि ये टेक्स्ट बुक के बियॉन्ड है. टेक्स्ट बुक के बियॉन्ड इसलिए मैं कहता हूं क्योंकि समहाउ इट इट वाज अ डिपार्चर फ्रॉम सम ऑफ द अर्ली ट्रेडिशन एंड इट स्टैब्लिश्ड राइट a new tradition for the history writing in modern India. And in fact, it was a departure from the colonial historiography, it was a departure from nationalist historiography, and it was even a departure from the mechanical Marxism also. And that's why I told you that you cannot classify him precisely as a Marxist historian, right? He had, the way I did tell you, that he had questioned so many fundamentals of Marxist history writing. But then somehow the way this person has established so many things, the colonial economic transformation, the class formation, the peasant movement, labor, caste, communalism, regionalism, ideology, popular mobilization, and so on. So there are multiple themes that he had integrated, and that's how sometimes people find it slightly tough to understand it, though I find it very lucid. So the way he was establishing all these things together, and that's how he was presenting a sort of an alternative perspective. But then very soon, you can see the departure of this person from the subaltern writing also, right? And in fact, there was an article. It's a not article. It was a sort of again monograph, I can say. There's a 95-page document that's called as The Decline of Subaltern and Subaltern Studies, and this he wrote in 1997. और इस किताब में he has somehow showed his disagreement with the later subaltern writing, because when it comes to the later subaltern writing, somehow there was a deviation by these later subaltern scholars, and in fact they were more inclined towards I can say postmodernism or post-structuralism, or let's say you can say Michael Foucault's tradition, right? And he was not very convinced with this idea because he found it as a departure, and probably this is the reason because of what he also somehow followed a different trend. And he has followed this different trend by writing this book, Writing Social History. It's a really a sort of remarkable book, because the way he has presented again an alternative picture, 1997, 98, this book got published. And that he has just picked up various themes such as labor, caste, gender, religious culture, popular consciousness, social reform, and historiographical methodology. So it was a very fresh perspective, came from his side. There's another book coming in 2002, that is this book, The Beyond Nationalist Frames, that is coming, and it is again a sort of new kind of write-up that we find from his side. This particular book has talked about, at one hand, decline of Marxism in history writing and rise of postmodernist history writing. And then the new culture which is coming in academia, that is the influence of the postmodernism. I keep on saying in the recent time how the postmodernism is something which is very much influencing the history writing. Of course, the positive and negatives both are there. I cannot say the negative, only the negatives are there. And in fact, apart from that, he has even written about how the growth of Hindutva politics was also there, though outside of it, but then of course it is there. And in fact, you all understand what exactly he wanted to write. So that's how I can say this person has been changing his method of history writing, and in fact the way he was picking up certain new questions to answer. And finally, one of the book which is undoubtedly one of the most remarkable work by him, that's called as Modern Times. And again, certain new themes had been picked up by him, the way he talked about environment, economy, and culture. And by linking all of them, he had been trying to somehow present a new and the fresh perspective. Undoubtedly, when he started his scholarship at that point of time, somehow environment and gender, they never used to be such a prominent issues. But then by merging all these, somehow he is reaching, he was trying to achieve, or he was trying to write a sort of new kind of historiography. So that's how he is again changing his history, history writing. So we can say that has been further followed, cast in modern India. And then finally, Sumit Sarkar, Essay of a Lifetime. So basically, if you read that particular book, I think this is the best book to understand how the scholar was evolving over the period. Fine. And then this is the last book, that is the Uncollected Writings, Sumit Sarkar. That was basically done by Tanika Sarkar. Okay. So she herself is a prominent scholar. She had been teaching in JNU, and his son Aditya Sarkar is also a prominent historian, teaching some in one of the universities of USA. So when it comes to the new writing, somehow he's made it more wide. Apart from that language, literature, middle class, then theater, cinema, music, dance, sports, he had been trying to hunt everything and trying to merge, synchronize everything in his history writing, that somehow he could make it more complete. So that chase for making history complete, right, that was one of the passion of Sumit Sarkar, and probably that was something which was keeping him alive. And that is one of the reasons because of what I love him the most. I liked him a lot because of course he was a great scholar, and I can just give a tribute with these words that the historian is a god, but the questions he taught us to ask will continue to shape history. So I believe that this person has exactly taught us to keep on asking the questions, because those questions would somehow unfold the new dimensions of history. So my tribute to Sumit sir, and I would like to thank him for giving us such a great writing. Thank you very much.